Now is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. We've reached Greg Rickford on holiday by phone. Well, Mr. Rickford, thanks for phoning in. Why has the Prime Minister agreed to have a meeting next week? It sure looks like he gave in to pressure from Chief Spence's hunger strike.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that, but I will tell you that from the historic Crown First Nations gathering last year, we did arrive at a work plan on a number of key issues that we wanted to move forward. We know that these are long-term challenges, but we're committed to addressing them, and specifically with respect to economic development and treaty working groups. Those are processes that the Prime Minister and Minister Duncan had met with National Chief at Leo as recent as November about setting up future meetings to follow progress and ensure we're making more progress on those items and others. So we're following up on that, and the Assembly of First Nations, of course, will determine the composition of the delegation that will be present at the meeting.
Okay, but are you saying that Chief Spence's hunger strike had nothing to do with it? This was just a meeting that the Prime Minister was planning to have anyway? Come on.
But this is part of a process that we've remained committed to, Terry. Obviously, anytime we have an opportunity to sit down and talk about economic development and work through some of the treaty issues. We had made offers consistently in the fall, particularly in late fall, early winter, around these pressing issues, and have made some real progress in areas that were mentioned earlier just before I came on, in housing and education and water. And so we're looking forward to building on these particular items and focusing on the issues that are ongoing with respect to economic development and treaty working groups.
Perhaps I can ask you to be more specific. Is this meeting then a chance to talk next week, or is the government prepared to make some changes? What changes is the government prepared to make, if any?
Well, first of all, we have moved forward on a number of items. As I said, housing and education, water. There have been some changes that we responded directly to the requests of a number of First Nations to provide them, for example, with more flexibilities on decisions to lease out their land and that process does remain voluntary for First Nations. So, we've made some progress there. But we see this as an extension of the Crown First Nations gathering, the work that the Minister had done with the National Chief at Leo prior to that, actually, on the Joint Action Plan, which focused on issues around governance and education, skills training, and other key issues like settling outstanding land claims. So we want to continue the trajectory that this progress is on, and we recognize now the importance to take that next step, and I'm quite sure that these meetings will be substantive. They will include, obviously, the Prime Minister, who was, by the way, had a presence at the Crown First Nations gathering. He stayed there the whole day. I sat in breakout groups with him, and I don't agree with the opinions expressed by my colleague just prior, Terry, with respect to this being a photo op. We've engaged a process here. And this is the next step forward.
All right, well, let's talk about how much more than a photo op it will really be. Let's take a specific, the Indian Act. Earlier, as you know, Mr. Rickford, I spoke with Grand Chief Stan Lutit. I just wanted to remind our viewers about what he had to say about his expectations for this meeting. Take a listen.
What we need to do is work with the government, not unilaterally, one party over another, not the government doing it by itself, but working with us in terms of how we're going to, if you will, modernize the Indian Act.
Rewrite bits of it?
Rewrite bits of it or lots of it.
So, Greg Rickford, is the government prepared to scrap or to make changes to the Indian Act?
Well, first of all, we've made great strides in these regards. There are a number of key pieces of legislation that communities have taken full advantage of, particularly under land management, which gets First Nations communities out from underneath more than 25% of the, or a quarter of the Indian Act in its totality. Obviously, recently we're moving forward on a private member's bill supporting Member of Parliament Rob Clark's bill that deals with some important but residual issues around, mentioning of residential school in the Indian Act. That needed to be removed. Obviously, removing some of the red tape involved with wills and testaments of First Nations, that was removed. And certainly with respect to ordinary bylaws made by chiefs and councils, that process was seen as onerous and will be removed. So there are some key components to this that we're very interested in moving away from and getting out of the Indian Act. That said, there are still a critical mass of communities that will tell you, and their leaders, that parts of the Indian Act still define the Crown's obligation with respect to First Nations communities. And I think the prudent thing to do is to advance this discussion in two important ways. First, to consult with First Nations with respect to what some of those proposed changes might look like in the future, and to also provide alternative forms of legislation for them to get out of components of the Indian Act. And those are very progressive agreements, obviously, and land management acts that deal with the ability of the communities, obviously, to move forward on economic development on a number of key fronts.
Now, Greg Rickford, before I let you go, if you don't mind, I'd just like to ask you, you are the Parliamentary Secretary, and our viewers can see a picture of you on the screen. You're the Parliamentary Secretary to John Duncan, the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. Some of our viewers might wonder, well, why hasn't he been more visible on this file? Why are we talking to you, not him?
Well, the Minister, of course, has been doing a lot of important work. There's been conversations with the Minister and National Chief at Leo. Obviously, I'm involved as part of my role to speak on a number of media engagements, but the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development obviously has shown a lot of key leadership in areas of housing, education, and very proactive in child and family services. And so doing a lot of the heavy lifting on some of the key elements of what we had heard from the Crown First Nation gathering. Obviously, the Minister was a key part of facilitating that, and I don't think there's any question of his leadership in these terms.
All right, Greg Rickford, thanks again for phoning in from your vacation. Thanks a lot for doing this. Coming up,